Hi everyone, so let's take a look at the Kuznets curve. Now this really helps us to understand the possible relationship between increasing income levels and economic growth against the impact upon inequality within the economy. Okay, so it shows that as an economy develops, economic inequality first increases and then decreases. Now please just ignore the green writing I've got written there, we'll come on to that in just a moment. I want you to just focus on our vertical axes having inequality and on our horizontal axes having income per capita here. Now what we can see firstly taking place is that as the economy grows and income per capita rises, then the level of inequality also increases. Okay, so if we take an example perhaps such as China, in 1980 China's Gini coefficient was around about 0.3. Right now it's argued to be around about 0.45. Now it's seen to reach a high of about 0.47, although I have read an FT article suggesting it could actually have been as high as 0.6. It does seem to have come down slightly since then. So let's firstly understand what takes place as to why there's a potential rise in inequality, as Kuznets argued. Okay, firstly, the asset owners enjoy rising incomes. So if you are actually asset rich and that you actually buy assets at an early stage, so be it property, be it shares in companies, so on, then what's likely to happen is that the actual values of land, as well as property, as well as shares and companies within the country are likely to increase. Now, as a direct result of that, it means that the asset rich will continue to become more well off as the economy develops. However, there's another point in addition to this, and that is that what you're likely to see, as we have seen with the Chinese economy over the last 30 years, is a lot of migration taking place from the rural sectors of the economy, from working in agricultural industry, to movements into large cities, which become increasingly the economic hubs of the economy. Now, as a direct result of that, there's a widening gulf between the incomes earned within the urban areas, which are far more productive, and the rural areas, which are far less productive and may use very primitive farming methods. Okay, further to this, that increased supply of workers will also depress wages within cities, and so the discrepancy between those that are asset rich and those that are asset poor is again going to widen. Okay, so those are the arguments which would suggest, yes, that this is absolutely right, and you can anticipate that inequality would actually grow. Now, this is all about the process of industrialization, and as we see here, the rural-urban wage differentials that may exist. Okay, but then we reach a point where inequality reaches its highest level, so this so commonly measured by the Gini coefficient, and at point 2 we can see it's beginning to actually come down. And here we can see what's likely to take place is firstly the rise of a welfare state that is actually using some sort of form of progressive taxation systems to help redistribute income from the asset rich to the asset poor. In addition to that, there's likely to be the incentive now to actually really invest in your own training and development as a labourer, so that you develop your own human capital and that you can actually benefit from having more advanced skills and more advanced knowledge and so on. So we can see this here, rise of a welfare state to redistribute incomes, human capital accumulation occurs, and workers are incentivized to actually pursue those additional wage differentials that they can earn as a result of actually investing in their own future by going to perhaps university or college and so on. Okay, so those are the arguments suggesting as to why this actually happens. It's much debated to what extent this does happen. Certainly it has happened within some economies, but less so within others. And many economies do continue to struggle with very, very high levels of inequality. South Africa is certainly a case in point there. Perhaps China could be heading on this downward slope. Obviously, time will tell. Now, it's also argued, though, that the Kuznets curve can be used when it comes to assessing the environment and various other areas as well. So here I've just put environmental degradation and income per capita. And so what's anticipated to actually occur is that in these early phases there's going to be a lot of deforestation, perhaps there's going to be a lot of negative externalities generated in the production of additional economic goods, which is going to have a negative impact on the environment. But then we reach a tipping point again. We reach a tipping point and actually the concern for the environment becomes far more important, and sustainable economic development becomes far more important. Perhaps if we could actually just understand this for very, very poor nations, of course what might be your absolute priority as a government there is eradicating absolute poverty, and therefore you may not actually give too much forethought to the actual environment when you know so many of your populace is actually going hungry. Okay, so then you reach a tipping point where actually, sustainability is really important. Now, it's also argued that the notion of this U-shaped, upside down U-shaped curve can also be used when it comes to other areas such as littering and smoking as well, smoking cigarettes and tobacco. That a similar sort of profile may exist. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, but there are some countries that certainly do seem to fit the mould. If we just consider the environmental degradation there as well, then America is a commonly cited example of where this doesn't necessarily fit this conventional form. And of course, Donald Trump is not terribly pro-environment. Okay, so there we go. I hope that's useful, guys. All right, thanks a lot.